Food is fuel for your body, your mind, and definitely your sport. But let's face it, nutrition is confusing, and the expectations on girls and women to be thin and have a six-pack are exhausting. If you've ever been frustrated with your body, confused about nutrition, obsessed with eating healthy, or guilty when you don't, underate, overate, or overtrained, and overwhelmed with all the pressure, then this podcast is for you. Nutrition can be easy. You can take control of it, but it might start with letting go of control by asking for help and making a change. I'm Lindsay Elizabeth Cortez, sports dietitian and owner of Rise Up Nutrition, where I empower female athletes to overcome nutrition concerns and perform at their highest level, to stop being confused by all the mixed or harmful messages, and finally have confidence in your body as a fierce, fit, and fueled female athlete. Hi fans, today I want to talk about Red S. Maybe a lot of you have heard about it. It's been a really popular topic in the nutrition world, especially when it comes to female nutrition and women's nutrition. For those of you who don't know, Red S is Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. It's a compilation of physiological, metabolic, endocrine, hormonal dysfunctions, hematological dysfunction, gastrointestinal, cardiovascular dysfunctions, all stemming from energy deficiency, as the name says. And a lot of people might tie this closely with the female athlete triad. If you haven't heard of that one, the female athlete triad is a triad of conditions, including an eating disorder, menstrual irregularities, and osteoporosis or bone irregularities, the triad of those three things. And so a lot of people kind of overlap these two. In fact, from more of a scientific perspective, they are two different things. Okay. One is because the female athlete triad is specific to females, whereas Red S actually is not. Yes, this is a female athlete nutrition podcast, and we talk a lot about female nutrition, but men can have energy deficiency as well. Men can experience Red S as well. In fact, there are certain sports where it's really an issue. And I think that's where, in the science community and nutrition community, for so many years, we only diagnosed female athlete triad. And there were a lot of men that were going undiagnosed with these issues. They are actually two different things. Now, the female athlete triad is sort of part of Red S. That triad is certainly included. And those things in the triad of menstrual dysfunction and osteoporosis and bone health and eating disorders, those things are kind of a little bit easier to track compared to some of the other signs and symptoms of Red S. So we do have a lot more research in that area. But just to tell you a bit more about Red S specifically, like I said, at the root of it is that if you're not getting enough energy, and it is your relative energy deficiency in sport, it's, are you getting enough energy relative to the energy you need to support your sport and your physical activity? And this is really key because so many people in the nutrition world think that, it's just all about calories. Calories in should equal calories out, and that should be some sort of balance. But it doesn't work that way. And it definitely doesn't work that way for athletes. Because as an athlete, no matter how many calories you're consuming, if you have practice, you have a run scheduled, or you've got a game or a competition or a match, the human body is pretty amazing, and it will do whatever it takes, whatever is necessary to get you through that run, to get you through that race. So in essence, as an athlete, your body is always prioritizing what you need to do for your sport. And so regardless of how much energy you're consuming, your body will say, okay, well, we're running now. So I guess I better start running. I guess I better find this energy from somewhere, even if I'm not consuming enough. Your body will figure out a way. And so how does your body figure out a way? It actually slows down other key metabolic processes within your body. So what that means is that your metabolism will slow. And this isn't something that most people can measure, right? I had the luxury of studying nutrition and getting my master's degree in it and doing testing. Like I've actually been able to measure my metabolism, but most people throughout their life never get to measure their metabolism, right? Most people never know. That's just, we have this big mythical, what is my metabolism, a good metabolism, or do I have a slow metabolism or a fast metabolism? Like there's actually a way to measure that, but most people never have the opportunity to do so. And the reality is with Red S, you might be unknowingly slowing and hurting your metabolism over time. So just to give you a number example, I'm kind of just pulling these numbers, not fully out of thin air, but I'm just making them up to give you an example. Let's say that you should have a resting metabolism of 1,400 calories. But if you've been in a state of energy deficiency or Red S, and you are not giving your body the energy it needs to support that metabolism, it actually begins to lower its resting metabolic rate. And over time, you could have a resting metabolism of 1,200 calories or 1,150. Now, maybe this doesn't seem like a big deal to you, but it is. That's your metabolism, your internal function that is slowing down. And what's happening to get it to slow down? Well, you're actually seeing changes in your blood and in your immune system. You're seeing that with a slower metabolism, your body cannot create all of the enzymes that it needs to digest food properly, or that it can't do the necessary bone turnover and pull together all the nutrients needed to support your bone health day in and day out. So it's not properly functioning is what I'm getting to here. So I've actually got on my screen in front of me kind of all of the signs and symptoms and issues that, when you're not getting enough energy, when you have relative energy deficiency in sport, what's happening. And I'll just read it to you, and I'll include this stuff in the show notes too. But when you have Red S, you are seeing declines in immunological function, menstrual function, bone health, endocrine health, metabolic health, hematological, growth and development, psychological, cardiovascular, and gastrointestinal. And some of the common symptoms, like again, if you don't necessarily knowing whether or not you have optimal digestion or optimal metabolism is such a vague thing unless you have the luxury of being tested often. And even at that testing would only be if you knew what your best baseline was prior to being in a state of Red S. And if you don't know what your baseline was, then it can be difficult to interpret this. But some symptoms that you might actually pick up on be things like decreased endurance performance, decreased muscular strength, not having enough energy, getting injured or having a current injury and not recovering well from it. Seeing a decreased training response. So when you are doing the same workouts as everybody else on your team and everybody else is progressing and you're not, your response is not the same. I'm having impaired judgment or decreased coordination. Like, I know this might seem silly, but like tripping and falling a lot because you don't have that reaction time and that judgment and that mind to body coordination because you don't have enough energy to support this. Decreased concentration for sure. And again, those kind of mental symptoms of being really irritable, having mood swings, feeling depressed. These are all parts of Red S. Of course, just because you're irritable doesn't automatically mean that you have Red S. But if you do have Red S, it's likely that you're also irritable. And if you heal the Red S and you heal the energy deficiency, then that irritability gets a lot better. And you notice, oh yeah, I'm having fun again, right? Like, oh yeah, I'm not so snappy with my family anymore. So all of this to say that relative energy deficiency, again, your body is prioritizing that, okay, I'm waking up and I'm forcing myself to do this workout. And so somehow your body toughs it out. See, that's the amazing thing about our body. It toughs it out. Our human bodies are amazing what we go through and what we put up with. And it puts up with you. It figures out a way. It figures out a way to deal with your shenanigans. It does. But at what cost? At what cost? At what expense? At the expense of your performance, at the expense of your bone health, at the expense of your resting metabolism, at the expense of your ability to digest, at the expense of your mental health. There's a cost to it. So, how many people suffer from red S? That can be a really difficult number to quantify because like I said before, like just because you're irritable, that doesn't mean you have red S, right? It's this like huge compilation of symptoms that can be really difficult to quantify. But I do have some statistics, maybe a bit more specific to the female athlete triad. And again, they are two separate things, but female athlete triad does kind of overlap with red S. And that's statistics that are shocking when you hear this. Okay. So again, female athlete triad is the triad between disordered eating, menstrual dysfunction, and osteoporosis or bone mineral dysfunctions, bone mineral density dysfunctions. Okay. So get this. Anywhere between, I know it's a wide range, but anywhere between 16 to 61% of female athletes suffer from hypothalamic pituitary menstrual disorders. 16 to 61% of female athletes suffer from having menstrual disorders. In elite population, up to 34% of female athletes in athletic sports, so that's like dance, gymnastics, or figure skating, up to 34% have menstrual disorders. In endurance sports like running, swimming, triathlons, 30% have menstrual disorders. In weight class sports, maybe like fighting, 23% have menstrual disorders. And in anti-gravity sports, thinking like volleyball, basketball, high jumpers, 17%. So this is ranging between 1 out of every 5 to 1 out of 3 female athletes. And this is in an elite category. All those stats I just read to you, that's in an elite category, which you would think like, well, if you're an elite athlete, you must be smart on this stuff, but that's in an elite category. The numbers, we don't have all the statistics about this, but the numbers have got to be higher in the college and high school population. Why? Because the college and high school population doesn't have all the same resources that the elite athletic population does. And this is true when we think about statistics in a high school population that says up to 60% of high school girls are dieting. Up to 60% of high school girls report dieting. And dieting is actually number one predictor of an eating disorder. And if we get talking about eating disorders, those numbers are staggering too. Are you ready for this? Up to 45% of female athletes show signs of disordered eating. 35% of college athletes show signs of developing anorexia, and 58% of college athletes show signs of developing bulimia. These are high numbers. It's like, look to your left, look to your right. One of your teammates, or maybe you, are struggling with this. Multiple people on your team, multiple girls in your friend group, multiple people in your running club are struggling with this. And so the prevalence is just staggering. And again, with red S specifically, like this is a kind of hard diagnosis. We have some great physicians. So if some people are fortunate to have some good physicians that are starting to diagnose it, but it is kind of a hard diagnosis. How I diagnose it as a dietitian is definitely looking at the symptoms and also looking at your intake and your expenditure. What are your sport needs and what is your energy availability? How much energy are you actually giving your body? So that's what we look at, is how much energy are you giving your body, and is it enough to support your sport and those basic physiological functions that you need just to be healthy? Right? Because here's the thing, as much as I was saying before that your body does incredible things and it's so impressive what your body puts up with, it is at a cost and it only puts up with it for so long. So if you want to be a strong, healthy, durable athlete, especially if you want that for a lifetime, you have to be a healthy human first. Even though your body might be putting up with some crap right now that you're doing to it, it won't put up with it forever, because if these basic physiological functions, if you're not even being a healthy human, there's no way you can be a good, strong, durable, successful athlete. There's no way. And you might for a little bit, I think this is where a lot of people get hung up, is like they might start reducing their calories or losing weight or eating healthy foods. And they might temporarily see improvements in their performance because they've made a change, and maybe those small changes did help them. But in the long term, if you are chronically in a state of energy deficiency and this affects your health as a human being, it eventually will destroy your performance as an athlete. One of the key reasons that we focus on the menstrual cycle for female athletes, not only is it something that we need to be healthy for fertility in our future, if that's ever a goal of yours to someday be fertile or have a family, but I know a lot of athletes might not be thinking about that, right? Especially if you're in high school and college, which, like I said, I think Red S is really rampant at that stage. But the reason that we focus on your menstrual cycle so much, even if you don't care about fertility, is because getting a monthly cycle is just kind of an easy indicator or sign that you do have healthy hormones. And if you have healthy hormones, including estrogen is one of the most powerful anabolic hormones in a woman's body that helps build bone. So if you're getting your monthly menstrual cycle, then it's just kind of, without doing a blood test, it's just your way of knowing, I must have enough estrogen, and therefore I have enough estrogen to also help me develop bone in a way that I need to, right? Because what happens if you're not developing bone? Not only are you not growing tall and strong, but if you're an athlete and you are pounding on your bones and you are running and you are jumping, and if you have weak bones, you will break those bones. It might not, seem like something traumatic necessarily, but hairline fractures, stress fractures, you will break a bone if you don't have strong bones. And here's another huge thing about your bone health. You only have a limited time to increase your bone health. So the kind of magical age is 30, that basically somewhere around age 30, obviously plus or minus a few years for individual things here, but somewhere around age 30 is when a woman kind of reaches her peak bone mass, meaning she's not really going to build any more stronger or denser bones. So we have up until age 30, but even more drastic than that is that 25% of your bone mass, nearly a quarter of your bone mass, does accumulate within your first 2 years of menarche, or basically within your first 2 years of having a period, are where nearly a quarter of your bone density and bone mass accumulates. So those first 2 years are really important. So if you're somebody who has a delayed period, if you're age 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and you haven't had a period yet, you are also really delaying and putting at risk your bone mass. Or if you say got your period at age 14, but then it went away at 15 when you joined your high school cross country team, you're only in that first year, and you are directly limiting your potential to develop good, strong bone mass. 25% of your bone mass accumulates within those first 2 years of getting your cycle. And then more so, those first few years are just the most important, because there's some estimates that say that 90% of your peak bone mass is achieved by somewhere around age 18, around 18. So like late teens, early adulthood is when you should have accumulated around 90%. That final 10-ish% will continue to accumulate throughout the years up until you're around age 30. But then it just kind of plateaus for us. It just kind of plateaus. And so this is why we care about your menstrual cycle, because again, not only do you need that endocrine function, proper hormones for a multitude of processes within your body, but it's also just that red flag, I guess, if you're not getting it, pun intended, if you're not getting your, monthly sign of red, then that's a red flag that you don't have enough estrogen. And if you don't have estrogen, you're not supporting the accumulation of bone mass. That puts you at huge risk of bone injury, which is that's a huge issue in your athletic career. I had a client one time, I'll leave her name out of it just to protect her. I'll call her Tina until I get a Tina client. But right now I don't have a client named Tina. So she shall be named Tina. And Tina was in high school She was a senior when I started working with her. And in her 4 years of high school, or she was going into her senior year. So in her 3 going on 4 years of high school, she had 3 stress fractures. 3 stress fractures. And her story was that she did have an irregular period. It took her a while to get it. Then she got it. Then she lost it. Then she kind of got it, but then she went on birth control, but then she didn't like birth control. So then she got off of it. And then she didn't have a period for a few months. It was irregular. It was completely irregular. And just, she clearly didn't have it for long. And she was a teenager. So, right, those important years, 3 stress fractures in basically 3 going on 4 years of high school. So obviously when I started working with her, her issues did stem from energy deficiency, relative energy deficiency in sport. She had to get more energy. She had to get more energy to support her being a healthy human first, and then get enough energy to help support her sport, which was running, and then have enough energy to have regular normal hormones and cycles, so that she was supporting the internal demands of her body too. And don't worry, we did this for Tina. Tina did great as we were working together. She absolutely began fueling with enough energy. And, the thing with Red S as well is that the cause of it, the cause is energy deficiency, but why are we energy deficient? That is individualized. That is unique for everybody. So yeah, some people aren't eating enough, but some people aren't eating enough because they're completely unaware of how much they should be eating, or they're not eating enough because, they're volume-wise eating a lot of food, but calorically not eating enough, or they're not eating enough intentionally, maybe because they are fearful of gaining weight, or they're fearful of what certain foods might do to them. Some people aren't eating enough because of disordered eating thoughts, because of anxiety around food. Some people aren't eating enough because of medication they're taking. I've met a lot of clients that are on, medication for ADD or ADHD, and then they're not eating enough because of that, because they forget to eat. The medication makes them not have an appetite. Some people aren't eating enough because of an actual eating disorder. Some people aren't eating enough just out of ignorance. They just don't know. Some people aren't eating enough because they are victims of diet culture, which is constantly telling you these messages of eat this, not that, eat more salad, eat more fiber, drink more water, and then you're just not getting enough energy that you actually need. But sometimes people are eating enough and they're actually just doing too much. That can be another side of it. That your energy output and physically what you're doing to your body is just extreme. And so some people might be, and I guess as I'm saying that, I'm like, well, then they're not eating enough for what they're doing, right? That's the whole point of this thing. But it might be, somebody could be eating, 5,000 calories a day, but if they're burning 10,000, they're still going to be in an energy deficiency, right? So what are you doing physically? Are you excessively exercising? Are you excessively training? And there's a lot of things too, when we think about being an athlete, where it's like, okay, I'm training. I have my training sessions, and then you might have your auxiliary training, whether that's skill work, technique work, or strength and conditioning, physical therapy and rehab work, right? All of that is still activity. Then what extra things are you adding on just because? Are you counting your steps every day? Are you wearing a fitness tracker and counting your steps? Are you using a stand-up desk at work when you don't need to be? If you're a marathoner, maybe you don't need to. Are you going out on, extra hikes and adventures with friends? And I'm not saying don't do that. Trust me. I'm not saying that you can't do those things if you're an athlete. You should be a well-rounded athlete that can do sport and do adventures with your friends and family. But these are all things that need to be taken into consideration. What are you asking your body to do? Or is it a combination of the two? Are you slightly under eating and slightly over exercising? Or maybe it's not a slightly at all. Maybe it's I'm massively under eating and massively over exercising. Yeah, so there's so many different reasons as to why this energy deficiency might be there. It can be, your intake. It can be your output. It can be cause more psychological and it can be a lack of education around what your body needs. I have another client, Tina number 2, a different client. She's a current client and she is 18 years old and she's already diagnosed with osteoporosis. She's already diagnosed with osteoporosis at 18 years old. And it's absolutely stemming from all of these things that I just mentioned. It's stemming from a combination of undereating, of overtraining, and of an ignorance around food and how much she's supposed to be eating, as well as a fear of food and a fear of, eating butter. A fear of having a brownie, a fear of what's going to happen if I do eat more. And here's the thing that I really want to express, not just to my client and why we're working together, but for all of you listening, is you shouldn't fear what would happen if you give your body energy. You should fear what can happen if you don't. You should fear what can happen if you deprive your body of the energy it needs. So at the core is energy. We have to address energy. And because everybody's reason for energy and why you might be in the state of red S is different. And I think that's what's so important about working through this with a professional, working with a dietitian. Of course, that's exactly what I do with my clients, is work through this and figure out what is it exactly that you need as an individual. What are the symptoms you are having? What are the issues that you are facing? Why are you facing them? And working to overcome them. Because you have to get out of the state of red S. Red S is not a good place to be in. Nothing good comes out of being in a state of energy deficiency for a short term or long term. For sure, even if you've only been in red S for a month or 2 months, you might not even know it, quite frankly, because a lot of these signs and symptoms might take months or years to actually show. But I could figure that out for you pretty soon. As an expert in this, I could figure out if you are energy deficient, whether or not you're showing those signs and symptoms, just by, figuring out what is it you need and what are you getting. And for those people who have been in a state of energy deficiency chronically, who are noticing those signs and symptoms of, I am injured, I do have a stress fracture, I don't have my period, or my period's irregular, I am moody all the time, I'm irritable, I'm struggling to concentrate in school, I'm not seeing the performance gains that I thought I should be, I'm losing muscle, I'm losing endurance. If that's you, we need to address this soon because you're likely already in a state of energy deficiency. And this is why working with a dietitian and a professional in this is so huge. One point I do want to make, because I've mentioned working with a dietitian. Yes, I am a dietitian, but there are so many other nutritionists out there. And I will tell you, just as I started this podcast, when I said, it's not as simple as calories in equals calories out, or that we should just be striving for energy maintenance. That's not the case with athletes. And that is why an actual registered dietitian, a sports dietitian specifically, is going to be the expert on this, because a nutritionist might not know this stuff. Hopefully they know more after listening to this podcast and researching it more. But you want to really have somebody help you through this who truly understands the ins and outs of the physical demand on your sport and everything that's going on inside your body, again, from a standpoint of your endocrine system, your hormones, your bone health, your metabolic system, your cardiovascular system, your gastrointestinal system, all of that is playing a role in this development of red S. And, I actually read this study recently that looked at, it wasn't specifically on red S, but it was on female athletes that had menstrual dysfunction. So female athletes that were not getting their period, and of course a control as well, which was female athletes that were getting their period. And they did a ton of blood work. They did a nutrition analysis, a food recall, and all of the athletes that had menstrual irregularities were from a numbers perspective. When I say from a numbers perspective, I mean looking at how much energy are you taking in versus how much do you actually need for your individual sport. And again, this is not a simple like I already said, it's not a simple calculation. It's an individualized calculation. It's not as simple as I ate 2,000 calories and I burned 1,000, so I have 1,000 calories left. It's not as simple as that because everybody needs a different amount of energy for their personal metabolism, right? So this is a personalized approach and has to be done on a one-on-one basis. So back to the study. When they did that, they found that, all these female athletes that have menstrual irregularities are in a state of energy deficiency. They did not have enough energy available. They didn't have energy availability that was appropriate for their sport. And so what they did is they did have a nutrition consult and they were provided with the nutrition recommendations for how to improve. And in a 3-month follow-up, all these subjects did improve in their energy availability, meaning that they were now getting more energy and more energy that their individual bodies needed for their sport. So that's a positive sign, but kind of the not so positive result of the study was that they still had menstrual irregularities. So they improved, but they didn't fully solve their problem. And the reason I bring this study up is because this is one huge reason why I work with my clients over a time period, a minimum of 3 months. I'm actually working with my clients. It is not a one and done appointment. It is not a here's your recommendations or here's your meal plan and then good luck, you're on your own. Because just as this study portrayed, advice is good for a little bit and you can do a little bit on your own, but you're probably not going to reach your full solution completely on your own. And I think this goes back to, again, why are you in this state of energy deficiency? Everybody's reason for being in a state of energy deficiency is so unique and so different and so individualized for you that it's going to take accountability. It's going to take weekly or multiple times a week of talking about these things, adjusting to these things. It's not just a here's your meal plan and figure it out. And just as the study showed, that helped a little bit, but it wasn't the full solution. And that's actually really what I do with my clients is I give them that full solution. We keep working together until you have the full solution, till red S is not an issue anymore, until you are healed, until you are recovered, until you know with confidence that you will not be back in a state of red S again 6 months from now. We find a full solution. And I think that is so, so key when it comes to addressing all of these issues. So I know this was a pretty in-depth discussion about red S. And I just want to say one more time that if you think that you have red S, if you've been diagnosed with red S, but more likely than not, you haven't had an official diagnosis. But if you think you might have red S, or the female athlete triad, or some weird combination of them, if you have menstrual dysfunction, if you're not getting your period regularly, if you've been diagnosed with any bone issues, or if you have stress fractures, that right there is a red flag. Why are you getting stress fractures? If you have any of the symptoms I just mentioned of being irritable, of having you're just not being able to digest your food, constantly being bloated, seeing that your blood work, you're always constantly low in iron, stunted growth, impaired judgment, irritable, moody with your family, starting to see hair loss. I didn't mention that one, but I'll mention it now. Your hair is becoming brittle and dry. Your nails are cracking all the time. Those are little signs that your body isn't taking care of itself because you're using what little energy you have on your sport. If this is you, if any of what I'm saying today resonates with you, please, please, please get in contact with me because nothing good comes of red S. In the short or long term, it will only get worse. I promise you that, but you can overcome this. You can be a healthy human. And when you are a healthy human, you can be a rock star athlete. You have to get out of red S. So it'll start with looking at the show notes, finding my email address, booking a call with me. Let's chat and see if we can get you out of this sooner rather than later. So I hope this was a helpful podcast for all of you. More to come soon. Reach out if you have Red S, female athlete triad, and we will work to overcome this and find a full solution as soon as possible.